Imagine for a moment, you're standing in a quiet place before anything has grown, before the noise of the world, before the story you tell about yourself, before the habits and identities you've collected like layers of dust. Here, there is only earth and silence. But the ground is alive, and it waits for you not to do something hurried, not to fix anything, but to choose what kind of seed you will plant in the soil of your own being. As Emmet Fox once taught, the outer conditions of your life are not causes, but effects. They are the harvest of earlier seeds planted perhaps in ignorance, or fear, or inherited belief, but still planted. So now, you're not here to blame or explain. You're here to begin again, consciously. And that makes all the difference. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Now, listen closely. Nothing in your life happens in isolation. No moment stands alone. Every word you speak, every feeling you nourish, every image you dwell on it, all goes somewhere. It embeds itself in your subconscious, and from there it sprouts behavior, reaction, magnetism. You are not merely responding to life. You are participating in it at every level, even when you forget. That is why righteousness right alignment with the laws of Mindy's not about moral superiority. It's about right causation. It's about thinking and feeling in a way that is true to your divine origin, true to your highest awareness. Righteousness, in the spiritual sense, is the decision to plant only what you are willing to harvest later, to think only what you are willing to become. The universe does not reward frantic effort or intellectual cleverness. It responds to principle, and principle is quiet. It works in seed form under the surface, beyond the ego's reach, beyond society's noise. Like a tree, it begins invisibly. No trumpet sounds, no applause greets the first sprout of sincerity in the soul. But that sprout, humble as it may be, is sacred, because it holds the pattern of something that will one day offer shade, shelter, and fruit, not only to you, but to others you haven't even met yet. So now I must ask not out loud, but within you, what seeds are already in your ground? What thoughts have you been repeating without realizing they are prayers? What emotional tones have become your inner weather? You see, life does not just happen. It unfolds according to the blueprints you carry, and those blueprints are drawn not with ink, but with attention. You have been sowing, even when you thought you were waiting. Every idle worry was a planting. Every judgment rehearsed under your breath was a planting. Every quiet act of kindness, every word of encouragement you gave, even when you yourself were struggling, those too were seeds. And they are growing. This moment, then, is not empty. It's not random. It is pregnant with invisible causes stretching back farther than you can trace. And still, because mind is infinite, you can begin anew at any time. You can shift your mental energy toward ideas that carry the vibration of life, clarity, peace, abundance. You can withdraw nourishment from the beliefs that produce bitterness or fear. You are the gardener. You are not at the mercy of your past. That's the great deception. The belief that your life is already fixed, already shaped. But you are not a finished sculpture. You are a living process. And even now, the inner soil of your being waits for new instruction, not through control, but through quiet recognition of what is truly yours to hold. You might feel resistance as you consider this. A part of you may say, "I've tried before and failed." Another part might whisper, "Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe this isn't for me." But hear this. Those voices are echoes, not truth. They come from old plantings, and they wither the moment you stop feeding them. You do not need to argue with them. You only need to stop watering them with belief. Begin again. That's always the invitation. No matter how long you've walked the wrong path, the tree of righteousness can still be planted. The soil of your being has not closed. The laws of mind do not condemn. They await. The moment you decide truly, humbly, firmly to think a better thought, to align with a higher idea, you have already begun. And from there, everything changes, not always instantly, not always with fireworks, but with quiet power, with the certainty of seed time and harvest, with the trust that what you plant today with clarity and care, must by law bear fruit in season. So take this first step, not as a performance, not as a resolution to impress others, but as a sacred act of alignment. You are not fixing yourself. You are not becoming someone else. You are remembering your origin, your power, your place in the great invisible order. And from here, you will plant ideas that carry life not just for today, but for all the tomorrows still waiting. There is a law, unbreakable and impersonal, that governs every form of creation in this universe, the law of mental equivalence. It is not a metaphor. It is not symbolic. It is as real as gravity, and it is working in your life every moment, whether you acknowledge it or not. This law states that whatever you hold in mind with feeling, with repetition, with focus, becomes your experience. Not always in the form you expect, but in vibration, in tone, in outcome it will match what you've planted inwardly. It must. The outer world cannot outgrow your inner equivalent. And where there is no equivalent, there is no capacity to receive. That's why certain breakthroughs remain out of reach, not because you are unworthy, not because the universe is withholding anything, but because you have not yet built the mental equivalent of that reality. You want peace, but your thoughts rehearse tension. You want abundance, but your mental blueprint is still shaped by fear of loss. You want deep connection, but inwardly you believe you're too much or not enough. And so life reflects not what you wish, but what you match. This is not punishment, it's precision. It is the intelligence of the system. No energy is wasted, no result is accidental. So ask yourself now, what are you building inside your mind today? Not just what you think when you try to be positive, but what you dwell on when no one's watching. What do you daydream about? What conversations do you replay? What outcomes do you quietly expect without even realizing it? These are your seeds. These are your blueprints. And over time, with enough attention and emotional repetition, they form the mold into which life will pour your experiences. You may think, but I can't help what I think, it just happens. That's a common myth. Your mind is not a wild animal. It is trainable. But like any training, it requires consistency, not intensity. You don't need to force your thoughts into perfection. You need to guide them, nudge them, reshape them through repeated choices. Each time you replace a fearful thought with a calm one, not through denial, but through deeper understanding, you are creating a new mental equivalent. Each time you resist the pull of criticism and instead affirm someone's potential, even silently, you shift the soil of your being. You begin building not only better relationships, but a better inner architecture from which relationships can thrive. This is why results do not depend on outside events or favorable circumstances. They depend on your capacity to hold the equivalent of what you say you want. You can attract nothing greater than what your inner structure can sustain. Otherwise, even if it arrives, you'll reject it, sabotage it, or feel so unworthy of it that you'll push it away unconsciously. Think of a tree again. You don't demand fruit from a sapling. You don't curse it for being unripe. You know it must grow a certain size, mature a certain root system, before it can bear the weight of harvest. And so too with you. Your consciousness must expand to meet what you desire. So build slowly, but build surely. Build by asking, what kind of inner structure matches the life I envision? Not just materially, but emotionally, relationally, spiritually. If you want joy, do you create space for it within? If you want clarity, do you give it room by letting go of mental clutter? If you want to be trusted, do you trust yourself first with truth? You're not building fantasies. You're constructing a life, one quiet thought at a time. And know this, the universe always meets you at the level of your inner equivalent, not your outer performance, not your public words, but your real energy. That's why nothing is wasted, not even the smallest correction in thought. When you shift inwardly, the world does respond, sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, but always in alignment with the new mold you've cast. You are not a victim of randomness. You are a participant in a divine equation. Your part is to craft the inner pattern. Life's part is to echo that pattern in form, never the reverse. So now, Let this idea settle into you not as a burden but as power. You are always planting. And what you plant repeatedly, with feeling, becomes a mental equivalent. And what you hold long enough becomes reality. With this awareness, you become deliberate. You don't waste attention. You don't entertain what undermines your vision. You don't panic when results delay, because you know the seed is real and law is never mocked. The fruit will come, but it must begin with the equivalent inside. And that is yours, to choose starting now. You've heard the phrase, go within. But what does that truly mean? It is more than quiet reflection. It is more than stepping away from the world. Going within means returning to the invisible core of thingsto, the dimension of life where all true causes reside. Because anything you see, touch, or experience outwardly is already the past. It is the echo of thoughts once planted. The visible is always the result. The invisible is always the source. So if you want to change the harvest, you must return to the place where planting begins. That place is invisible. It is the garden of consciousness, and you have access to it every moment, not through ritual or striving, but through awareness. This is the great spiritual secret. True power lies beneath appearances. The strongest forces do not shout. They move silently, like gravity, like breath, like love. And when you begin to work with the invisible not just in concept, but in daily attention, you shift from being a reactor to life into being a conscious cultivator of it. To root yourself in the invisible means you stop taking appearances at face value. You see beyond the outer condition and ask, what is this showing me about my own vibration, my own beliefs? This is not blame, it is ownership. There's a profound difference. Ownership says, I have power here. I am not at the mercy of circumstance. I can choose differently, not just outwardly, but at the level of thought and belief. As Emmet Fox often said, problems are not things, they are wrong arrangements of mind. Fix the arrangement, and the problem dissolves, not always in a flash, but inevitably. You don't fight shadows. You turn on light. You don't battle chaos. You introduce order, and order begins in thought. Rooting in the invisible also means giving up the addiction to proof. The ego craves visible validation, quick wins, applause. But spirit knows that real growth happens in silence. A seed breaks open underground, in darkness, unseen. So does your transformation. You may not see immediate change when you begin this deeper work. That's not failure, that's process. Just as the tree's roots must anchor before it can reach for the sky, your consciousness must deepen before new fruit can form. Trust that. Don't pull up the seed to check if it's working. Don't demand signs. Live the idea until the signs appear. To do that, you'll need to practice what Fox called scientific prayer, not begging, but aligning. Prayer, in this sense, is the act of turning your full attention to the truth behind appearances. It is holding in consciousness the idea of harmony, order, abundance, peace until your inner vibration matches it. You don't ask for peace. You become the mental equivalent of peace. And then peace finds you. This rooting takes courage, because the world around you will always shout for your attention. It will offer fear, outrage, distraction. But if your roots are deep, you won't be shaken. You'll feel the wind, but you'll remain anchored. Not because you're numb, but because you've trained yourself to draw strength from the unseen. And that strength changes everything. It quiets anxiety, not by eliminating uncertainty, but by reminding you where real certainty lives. It's not out there. It's not in circumstances. It's in your capacity to return, again and again, to the center, to the truth that is not moved by headlines, gossip, market trends, or fleeting moods. It is eternal, and it lives in you. You don't have to become someone else to access this. You don't have to perfect yourself. You only have to pause long enough to feel your own roots deeper than thought, deeper than identity. Beneath it all, there is a knowing, and that knowing is your compass. From this place, you begin to plant not random wishes, but deliberate ideas. You choose thoughts that feel like home to your soul. You choose beliefs that uplift and strengthen. You choose mental images that bless all they touch, and you hold them not with strain but with steadiness. You let them root. You water them with quiet attention. You trust the invisible. And in time, the visible will reflect that trust, because all things grow from within outward, always. And when your roots are in truth, the fruit cannot fail to come. So now, the invitation is simple but profound. Turn inward. Anchor deep. Stop chasing the fruit and start feeding the root. Because what is invisible today becomes your world tomorrow. Where your attention goes, life grows. It's not just a catchy phrase, it is law. More precise than any machine, more impartial than any judge, this law never sleeps. Every moment, you are giving attention to something, and in doing so, you are feeding it, nourishing it, investing energy into it, even if you're unaware. And that energy does not evaporate. It takes root. It gathers momentum. It shapes the next turn in your path. The soil of your being does not discriminate. It doesn't ask whether you are giving attention to something helpful or harmful, inspired or anxious. It simply receives. Your attention is the water. Your feeling is the sunlight. What you dwell on is what you grow. This is why your greatest power is not in forceful will, but in focused attention. What you consistently return to, especially when you are tired, distracted, or triggered, shows you what you are really planting. Most people are not planting consciously. They wake up and react. They check messages, scroll news, listen to opinions, absorb tension. Without knowing it, they are watering weeds, thought patterns they never meant to encourage. And then they wonder why their garden feels overrun with worry, conflict, comparison. But you are not most people, not anymore. You now understand that attention is sacred. It is not neutral. It is the currency of creation. Where you place it, especially over time, determines the shape of your days. So begin to reclaim it. Start by noticing. What thoughts ask most often for your attention? Not just the loud ones, but the subtle ones. The what-ifs of anxiety, the grudges disguised as reflection, the expectations of others that echo as your own. These are not harmless. They are the roots of your experience. Then, choose. You must choose, daily, hourly, sometimes moment by moment, what you are willing to water. Do not wait until you feel fully confident or free of fear. Start now. Attention is not about emotion, it is about decision. You can choose to withdraw attention from confusion and place it, steadily, on clarity. You can choose to let a worry pass by like a cloud, and instead turn inward to the quiet sense that all is working together for your good. This doesn't mean suppressing hard thoughts or pretending nothing hurts. It means refusing to make pain your focus. It means acknowledging what's real without making it your ruler. And that is spiritual maturity. The ability to observe your inner weather without letting it become your climate. The ability to shift your gaze, not by force, but by practice. Because the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. At first, it may feel awkward, like steering a ship through unfamiliar waters, but eventually, it becomes instinct. You begin to sense when your attention has wandered into old fear. You feel the pull of doubt, but you don't surrender to it. You come back again and again to the ideas you've chosen to grow. This is what Emmet Fox called the mental diet. Not a restriction, but a recalibration. You feed only what serves your highest pattern. You stop entertaining inner conversations that pull you off course. You stop arguing with shadows. You invest your energy like someone who knows its value. And from that shift, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting and you start creating. You stop being at the mercy of mental weather, and you begin to direct the seasons of your life, not through denial, but through deliberate presence. You become a conscious gardener of your own mind, and what you water will grow. Water an idea of peace, and peace begins to shape your tone, your relationships, your decisions. Water an idea of worthiness, and you begin to show up with a different posture. Water an image of divine order, and you start to recognize guidance where you used to see chaos. But beware, the weeds will call for your attention too. They always do. Fear wants to be fed. Gossip wants to be repeated. Anger wants to be justified. These mental patterns survive only through your attention, and you are not required to give it. You are free. Free to choose again. Free to redirect. Free to return to your chosen idea without guilt, without drama, without delay. So now, be honest. What do you want to grow? And more importantly, what are you actually watering today? This is not about being perfect. It is about being aware. It is about catching yourself sooner, shifting sooner, coming back to truth sooner. Because every return to focused attention strengthens your root. Every act of conscious choosing builds a new pathway. And over time, the garden changes not by force, but by faithful tending. This is the real work. This is the path of righteousness, not in appearance, but in alignment. And you are already on it. Not every bright idea is a true idea. In the garden of your mind, not every seed deserves to be planted. Some thoughts appear noble, but they carry no life. Others seem harmless, but quietly drain your power. This is where discernment becomes sacred, not just as a moral compass, but as a spiritual necessity. Spiritual discernment is the ability to feel the weight and origin of a thought before you let it take root. It is the quiet inner knowing that says, "This carries truth," or "This is just noise dressed up as wisdom." In a world flooded with opinions, advice, and polished inspiration, this is not optional. It is vital. You don't need more ideas. You need the right ones, the ones aligned with the deeper laws of life, the ones born of principle, the ones that will stand when emotion fades and challenge arrives. Because when the storm comes, it won't matter how eloquent the idea sounded. It will matter whether it was real. Emmet Fox warned of the half-truths that populate much of spiritual talk ideas that feel good but don't produce results. You attract what you want, they say, but omit the part where you must become what you seek. Just visualize it, they promise, but skip over the work of cleansing subconscious beliefs that sabotage the very image you're building. Discernment cuts through the fog. It isn't cynical, it's clear. It doesn't reject inspiration, it tests it. It listens for tone, for substance, for resonance with eternal truths. And here's how you begin to cultivate it. By watching the fruit. A thought that carries truth will leave you clearer, not confused, stronger, not more dependent. It will quiet anxiety, not just mask it. It will empower choice, not fuel blame. Even if it challenges you, it will do so with dignity, not shame. So, when a new idea arises in your mind or from the mouth of another, pause, not dramatically, just internally. Ask, if I plant this idea in my mind and let it grow, what kind of fruit will it bear in my behavior, in my relationships, in my peace? And be honest with the answer. This discernment is not just about bad or good thoughts. Often, it's about choosing between the almost true and the fully aligned. A belief might sound comforting, even spiritually dressed, but if it subtly places your power outside of you, if it encourages waiting rather than growing, if it whispers, "You're not ready until," then it must be questioned. This is not about becoming suspicious of every idea. It's about becoming selective, because your mind is not a dumping ground. It is a sacred garden, and the ideas you allow to live there will shape the rest of your life. You might wonder, but how do I know if an idea is truly aligned? The answer is simpler than it sounds. Truth feels stable, not hyped, not euphoric, stable. There's a grounded quietness to it, a sense of deep exhale, a soft inner yes that doesn't need convincing. When you find that tone in an idea, keep it, water it, build your mental structure around it. And if an idea feels exciting but leaves you anxious an hour later, let it go. If it inspires you in the moment but fades into guilt or doubt, it wasn't rooted in principle. If it empowers your ego but weakens your soul, it's not for you. We live in a time of overexposure. Ideas bombard you from every direction: books, videos, voices, reels, tweets. If you don't choose what you plant, someone else will. That's not paranoia. That's just the nature of attention. So decide now to become a wise planter. Let your spiritual garden be filled with thoughts that feed your clarity, strengthen your will, expand your compassion. Let your mind become a place where ideas are welcomed, but only after they've passed through the fire of discernment. This is how you plant for endurance, not for today's applause, but for tomorrow's peace. Not for surface motivation, but for deep-rooted transformation. Because the fruit you bear tomorrow depends entirely on what you're willing to plant and protect today. Every gardener knows this. To make room for healthy growth, you must be willing to prune. Not every branch is meant to stay. Not every root is worth saving. And in the spiritual garden of your mind, this principle is just as real. If you truly want to live in alignment with truth, you must be willing to let go of the old patterns, beliefs, and emotional habits that no longer serve the life you're building. Pruning is not punishment, it's refinement. It's an act of care, not cruelty. The tree does not grieve when a dead branch is cut. It redirects life to where it's needed most. It grows stronger, more focused, more free. And so must you. But understand, letting go is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. You stop repeating that old story, not because you've proven anything, but because it no longer fits. You stop justifying your resentment, not because the pain was unreal, but because you refuse to be defined by it. You stop clinging to the identity of the wounded, the overlooked, the misunderstood, because deep down, you know your soul is not a victim, it is a creator. Emmet Fox was clear. There is no such thing as a hopeless case. But the reason most people stay stuck is not because they lack power, it's because they refuse to release what's familiar. The known, even when painful, can feel safer than the unknown. So we stay loyal to limitation. We nurture stories that sabotage us. We rehearse memories that shrink us. And yet, life keeps whispering, let it go. Not as a cliché, not as a spiritual shortcut, but as a living command from the law of mind itself. Because increase always follows release. The universe abhors stagnation. You cannot receive the new while clutching the old. You cannot evolve while protecting beliefs that deny your wholeness. You cannot climb while dragging the weight of worn-out definitions of who you used to be. So, what must be pruned in you? Maybe it's a belief that you have to struggle to be worthy. Maybe it's a pattern of needing others to validate your worth. Maybe it's the unconscious assumption that things always fall apart, or that abundance is for others, or that forgiveness means weakness. Whatever it is, you will feel its expiration, not in one grand moment, but in the growing discomfort it brings. When you begin to outgrow a thought, it loses its harmony. It starts to feel heavy, repetitive, false. Pay attention to that feeling. It is not failure, it is invitation. The invitation is this: to release what no longer bears fruit, so life can flow where it's meant to. And know this: pruning is not rejection. You are not cutting away parts of yourself, you are cutting away illusions. The fear is not you, the guilt is not you. The conditioning, the coping, the self-image built on survival, they served their season. But now, the soul is ready for more, and more requires space. This is why spiritual growth often feels like subtraction before it feels like expansion. You begin to lose taste for certain conversations. You no longer tolerate certain moods. You stop chasing certain people. Not because you've become cold, but because your roots have deepened, and what once excited you now exhausts you. Honor that. Let the pruning be sacred. Let it be conscious. Sit with the old pattern long enough to understand it, but not so long that you keep feeding it. Thank it if you must. Then cut it off, gently but surely. Not with violence, but with clarity. And remember, nothing true in you can ever be lost. Only what was false, what was borrowed, what was built in fear, that's what dies in the pruning. And when it does, life rushes in. More vitality, more clarity, more room to plant the ideas that match who you are becoming. This is the quiet law. To rise higher, you must grow lighter. And you are allowed to let go. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've decided to live from truth, not history. So pick up the sheer snot of judgment, but of wisdom and begin. Imagination is not a toy. It is not a pleasant escape or a momentary diversion. Imagination, rightly used, is the divine workshop of your inner world. It is where you shape the unseen patterns of thought that eventually harden into the facts of your life. When aligned with truth, imagination becomes sacred, an instrument of spirit moving through you. The world has misunderstood this power. From an early age, you were likely told to come back to reality, as if imagination were something to grow out of. But those who taught you that did not understand that reality itself is first shaped by what the mind dares to picture and hold. Every great inventor, healer, and spiritual master saw what was not yet seen. They worked with the invisible before the world could name it. This is not fantasy, it is creative vision. And the law of mind responds to it unfailingly. But not all imagination is righteous. That's the key. There is imagination rooted in fear, what the world calls worst-case scenario thinking. There is imagination that rehearses conflict, failure, catastrophe. And just as surely as hopeful vision shapes your path, so does anxious imaging carve out dark detours. The law of mental equivalence does not sort good from bad. It only reflects what you hold with feeling. So the question is not, do you have imagination? The question is, how are you using it? To use imagination righteously is to become intentional. You begin to picture not in desperation or escape, but in quiet trust. You see yourself calm in situations where chaos once ruled. You see yourself generous in the face of limitation. You imagine being grounded when stress calls your name, steady when doubt knocks at your door. You don't need to force this vision. You only need to feel it as real, not through strained affirmations, but through repetition, consistency, and sincerity. Each time you return to the image, you strengthen the mold. You build the spiritual structure. As Emmet Fox explained, this is not about manipulating outcome, it's about aligning with spiritual principle. A true image, a righteous image, is one that uplifts not only you, but the field around you. It is an image that holds order, love, integrity, and possibility. And it works even when you're tired. It works even when appearances scream the opposite. Because imagination, like seed planting, does not require evidence. It requires endurance. Let's be clear. You are already imagining constantly. You picture how your day will go, how that conversation might unfold, how your finances will play out, how your health might shift. Much of this happens unconsciously, but once you awaken to the creative force of your inner vision, you stop leaving it to habit. You choose to imagine consciously, reverently. This is how the mind becomes aligned with spirit, not just by knowing truth intellectually, but by seeing it, feeling it, and then living it. You may be tempted to say, but that feels fake. That's only because the old mental imagery has been practiced for so long, it feels like truth. But truth is not what's familiar, it's what aligns with your divine nature. So keep practicing the new image, not as performance, but as prayer. Imagine yourself whole, not perfect whole. Imagine your relationships clear, honest, respectful. Imagine your work infused with meaning. Imagine money arriving through integrity and usefulness. Imagine your body responding to kindness, your emotions softening into strength. Imagine peace not as escape, but as atmosphere. These are not fantasies. They are instructions to your subconscious. They are blueprints handed to the law. The more righteous your imagination, the more coherent your actions become. You don't just think better, you walk differently. You speak more purposefully. You forgive faster. You see others through clearer eyes. Because when you carry a true image long enough, it reshapes not only your experience, but your identity. You begin to know who you are, not through memory or mood, but through alignment. You become the tree planted by rivers of truth, steady, fruitful, unmoved by weather. And your imagination becomes not just a private tool, but a gift to the world. Because the more you live from the true image, the more others feel safe doing the same. So, start now. See clearly, feel deeply, choose deliberately. Because what you imagine with truth and conviction is already growing. Faith has been misrepresented for far too long. It is not blind belief, it is not passive waiting, and it is certainly not wishful thinking. Faith, in its highest form, is alignmenta conscious, ongoing agreement between your inner state and the spiritual laws that govern all life. When you walk in faith, you are not hoping. You are harmonizing. To live by faith is to anchor yourself in the unseen order of things. It is the choice to trust spiritual principle over sensory evidence sino, because you're ignoring reality, but because you know reality begins within. This isn't denial, it's devotion to the truth, that what is real is not always what is visible, and what is visible is not always what is lasting. Emmet Fox taught that faith is not something you try to have, it's something you build through attention, through repetition, through conscious agreement with the laws of mind. Faith is the result of right thinking, not a substitute for it. It begins with a decision. I will no longer place my security in changing things. This doesn't mean you don't care about outcomes. It means you don't collapse when they change, because you have placed your root in something deeper, something eternal. Faith is that root. It doesn't make you rigid. It makes you resilient. When you walk in faith, you no longer panic when outer conditions fluctuate. You understand that your peace does not depend on circumstances, it depends on congruence. When your thoughts, feelings, and intentions are aligned with spiritual truth, you become unshakable, not because storms don't come, but because your house is built on rock, not sand. Faith does not guarantee smooth roads. It guarantees inner stability. It is the posture of the soul that says, I don't know how this will unfold, but I know the law is working. I know order is present. I know nothing is wasted. That inner knowing shapes the way you think, speak, move, and even wait. Because faith is not passive. It acts, it prepares, it makes space. It clears the ground for what it knows must arrive in time. Not through force, but through law. Think of the tree again. It doesn't rush to grow. It doesn't plead for sunlight. It simply reaches, steadily, because it trusts the rhythm of the seasons. It trusts that what it needs will come, and while it waits, it expands. That is faith. And for you, that means showing up before the result appears. It means speaking the truth even when doubt whispers. It means acting from abundance before your bank account reflects it. It means forgiving before the apology comes. Not to manipulate outcomes, but because your soul already knows the truth. That kind of living is rare. It is quiet, it is powerful, and it will change your life. Because when you are aligned, everything adjusts. Not always instantly, not always the way you imagined, but faithfully, precisely, in harmony with what you've dared to believe. But here's the deeper truth. Your life is always in alignment with something. The question is, with what? Are you aligned with fear, lack, resentment? Or are you aligned with peace, order, and the quiet certainty that spirit never fails? Because whatever you are most emotionally loyal to, that is your real faith. You cannot fake alignment. You can speak affirmations all day, but if you're secretly feeding anxiety, the law responds to that. Faith is not what you say aloud. It is what you rehearse in the silence. That's why the inner work matters. Not to earn results, but to allow them. The tree doesn't beg for fruit. It simply grows in the right direction. So do you. And the more you practice this alignment, the easier it becomes to recognize when you're off course. You feel the friction. You sense the misfit. And instead of spiraling, you realign, quietly, willingly, without drama. Because faith is not the absence of deviation. It is the willingness to return. So here is your invitation. Let faith become your foundation, not because it makes life predictable, but because it makes you unshakable. When fear knocks, answer with alignment. When doubt arises, don't wrestle, realign. When nothing seems to move, remember, the root grows first. This is not theory. It is the lived experience of every soul who has dared to trust the unseen over the obvious. And now, it is yours to live as well. Storms are not signs that something is wrong. They are part of life's rhythm. Every tree that has stood the test of time has bent in the wind, lost leaves to the cold, and endured seasons of drought. But it remained rooted. It did not confuse the storm with failure. It did not mistake shaking for collapse. And neither should you. There will be moments on this path when nothing seems to reflect your inner work, when the world around you contradicts what you believe, when results delay, misunderstandings arise, or unexpected chaos breaks the surface of your life. It is then that your root is tested not to punish you, but to strengthen you. This is not poetic metaphor. It is practical reality. Spiritual work does not immunize you from challenge. In fact, it sometimes brings the old patterns up faster so they can be dissolved in the light of your new awareness. That's not a sign you've regressed. It's a sign that something deeper is shifting. So when the winds rise, do not panic. Do not tear up your mental garden and declare the process broken. Return to your root. Return to the truth you have planted. Even if you cannot see results yet, remember, the tree does not bear fruit the moment after the seed is planted. There is a season of silence, of stillness, of trust. Emmet Fox reminded us. The only way to break the chain of cause and effect is to introduce a new cause. That's what you've been doing. And sometimes that new cause hasn't yet overtaken the momentum of the old. That doesn't mean it's not working. It means you must hold the vision a little longer. And that's where courage comes. Not loud, flashy courage, but quiet, inner courage. The kind that shows up at dawn when your thoughts try to pull you backward. The kind that breathes through the tension. That says, I don't know how, but I will stay grounded in what I do know. You know that peace is real. You know that order exists beyond the noise. You know that the law responds not to panic, but to presence. This is how you hold to vision amid storm. You stay consistent not to prove anything, but because inconsistency only delays the process. You keep choosing the thought that aligns with truth, even when fear seems more immediate. You speak life into situations that appear lifeless, not out of denial, but because you know everything changes, but principle remains. And here's what the storm reveals, that calm never could, the difference between theory and embodiment. When life is easy, you may repeat spiritual phrases. But when life shakes you, you find out which ideas are truly rooted in your being. That's not failure, it's refinement. It's where the surface beliefs fall away, and the deeper knowing rises. You begin to live not from memory or mimicry, but from direct contact with spirit. And something shifts. You become less reactive, less desperate for proof, less concerned with appearances. You begin to embody the truth, not just talk about it. You begin to walk in calm, not because there is no chaos, but because the chaos no longer commands your center. You become the one who carries peace into the room, instead of needing peace from the room. That is spiritual maturity, and it only comes by staying grounded when the wind tries to uproot you. So in this moment, whatever storm may be pressing on your life, do not withdraw. Do not retreat into panic or familiar habits. Breathe, stand still inside, feel your own roots, recall the truth you've planted, and trust that no storm can touch what is real in you. Because storms pass, but what is rooted in truth endures. You are not the weather, you are the tree, and your strength lies not in avoiding the storm but in standing tall through it, nourished from within, connected to the deeper law that never shifts. So hold to your vision, not with tension, but with trust. The fruit is still coming. Look at the results in your life not as a judgment, but as a mirror. What you see around you, the tone of your relationships, the rhythm of your days, the consistency or chaos in your work, all of it is the fruit, and fruit doesn't lie. It reveals the nature of the tree, quietly, without drama. It doesn't ask for explanation. It simply shows what has been nourished, repeated, believed. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because it leaves no room for blame. The law is impersonal. It doesn't care about how sincere your intentions were if your dominant inner pattern contradicted them. If your words claimed peace, but your mind rehearsed panic, the fruit is panic. If you declared abundance but secretly feared loss every time you checked your balance, the fruit is scarcity. The tree reveals itself, not to punish, but to teach. There's no use trying to harvest figs from thorns. The universe does not override your mental equivalent just because you want something badly. It respects your inner state too much for that. And yet, this is not cause for despair. This is the doorway into total transformation. Because if your results are the fruit, and the fruit came from seed, then your power lies at the root. Once you stop trying to fix fruit and start tending the root, everything shifts. It's humbling at first. You see how much energy you've poured into appearances, into managing impressions, into controlling outcomes. You realize how often you've tried to make something work on the outside that was never truly aligned on the inside. And that realization breaks something open. The surface cracks, the ego fractures, and suddenly there's space for truth, for clarity, for beginning again. In this space, it's common to feel hollow. That deadness Neville spoke of, the moment when old beliefs have been uprooted but new ones haven't taken hold, settles over the soul. It is not depression, though it can feel like it. It is not failure, though the absence of visible movement can seem like loss. It is the fallow moment, the space between identities, the space between patterns. This is where many give up. They run back to the familiar, even if it wounds them. They mistake the silence for absence, the pause for punishment. But if you can hold through this, if you can stay rooted when nothing seems to bloom, you will meet something deeper than momentum. You will meet the quiet certainty of spiritual law. And in that certainty, you stop performing. You stop explaining. You stop reaching outward for signs. You begin instead to live from truth, not because it feels good, but because it is real. You think peace not to fix anything, but because peace is aligned. You act with clarity not to force results, but because clarity is correct. You plant better seeds not for applause, but because chaos no longer tastes like home. And then one day, almost unnoticed, the fruit begins to change. A conversation that once triggered you leaves you calm. A pattern that used to repeat dissolves without effort. A door opens, not because you pushed it, but because you finally matched the room behind it. The outer shifts because the inner has matured. This is the law. Quiet, consistent, complete. So now, take the mirror of your life and bless it, even if it reveals what you'd rather not see. Let it be the teacher it is, and let that teaching guide your next planting. You don't need to be ashamed of the fruit. You only need to become faithful to the seed. Righteousness is not a fixed condition. It is a living practice daily, moment by moment, like the gardener's quiet tending. It is not a badge you wear, but a posture you hold, especially when no one is looking, when your hands are tired, when the soil is dry, when nothing outside gives you a reason to keep believing, but you do. This is the path of cultivation. Not dramatic change, not public declarations, but the unglamorous work of returning again and again to the ideas that align with your soul. Not because they feel good in the moment, but because they are true. There's a clarity in that kind of work, a sacred sobriety. You stop trying to feel spiritual, and you start being aligned. You begin to realize the outer world will always move. People come and go. Finances rise and fall. Emotions shift like tides, but there is something beneath all of it that stays. The deeper ground, the center. And your task is not to master the waves, but to root yourself in what does not move. This is why spiritual practice matters, not for show, not for approval, but because without it, your mind will drift. Left untended, your attention will default to fear. Your language will mirror the world's confusion. You will repeat what you hear, not what you know. But with practice, everything sharpens. You begin the day with intention, not reaction. You pause before responding. You catch yourself mid-thought and redirect, not out of guilt, but out of commitment. You begin to sense when you are off, not dramatically, but subtly. A slight tightening, a dimming of clarity, and instead of spiraling, you realign. This is cultivation. And sometimes, it is lonely. You may find yourself walking away from conversations that used to excite you. You may feel misunderstood. Your priorities change. Your tone deepens. The world doesn't always reward that immediately, but the soul does. You begin to experience a different kind of joy, quiet, resilient, unshaken by outcomes. You stop looking for proof that your practice is working. You know it is, because you've changed, not just your results, your reflexes. You return to truth faster. You feel when your attention slips, and you bring it back. You bless where you used to blame. You listen more than you explain. And yes, you'll still fall short. You'll still have moments of fear, pettiness, distraction. But they don't stick. They don't define. They don't drag you under for long. Because righteousness is not perfection. It's return. It's remembering, even when you forget. It's realignment, even when the storm hits. It's showing up again, not with force, but with fidelity. This is what makes your practice powerful, not that you never falter, but that you don't stay fallen. You risen not by effort, but by principle. You don't need to be inspired every day. You need to be consistent. You don't need to feel it fully to plant it faithfully. You plant because it is right. You return because the garden needs tending. You speak because your voice shapes atmosphere. And over time, that practice becomes identity. You become someone others look to know because you're perfect, but because you're grounded. You carry stillness. You speak with calm. You choose presence over performance. And without preaching, without needing credit, your very way of being becomes a kind of nourishment. But let this be clear. None of this happens accidentally. Spiritual growth is not automatic. It is not guaranteed with time. It is cultivated or it is lost. So commit not once, but again and again. When the world tempts you to drift, return to your center. When confusion pulls, return to what you know, not what you feel. When noise overwhelms, clear the ground. This is your sacred work, your quiet rebellion against the chaos of the unconscious. And it is working whether anyone sees it or not. There is a cruelty in modern life that whispers, if it's not fast, it's not working. That voice lies. It doesn't understand the rhythms of growth, the wisdom of slow unfolding, the dignity of roots that take time to deepen before they rise. In the spiritual life, patience is not passivity, it is participation in the deeper timing of things. It is agreement with the laws of becoming. You do not plant an acorn and demand a forest. You do not place a seed in soil and wake up angry it has not bloomed. But in the mind, impatience is subtler. You hold to an idea for 3 days and then collapse into doubt. You affirm truth for a week, then scour your outer life for evidence, and if none appears, you declare the law broken. What you've really done is interrupt the process. You've pulled up the seed. There is no spiritual harvest without patience. Not because the law is slow, but because your consciousness must stretch to match what you've planted. This takes time, and no calendar time, but soul time. The unwinding of old beliefs, the calming of reactive patterns, the replacing of inherited assumptions, all of this happens below the surface. Emmet Fox said, "It is your mental equivalent that brings results, not your hope, not your trying." But that equivalent is not always built overnight, especially if it contradicts years of subconscious programming. You may plant the idea of abundance, but your nervous system still reacts to lack. You may affirm inner peace, but a single message from someone can trigger the old defense. These are not failures. They are symptoms of something deeper being rewritten. You must allow the season of invisible work. This is where many turn back. They say the practice isn't working when what they really mean is, it's not blooming fast enough to soothe my fear. But spiritual maturity asks more of you. It asks that you endure the silence, not as punishment, but as proof that something is maturing where you cannot yet see. There is no shame in waiting. What matters is how you wait. Do you wait with resentment, checking your spiritual watch, ready to throw away the idea at the first sign of delay? Or do you wait with quiet knowing, tending the inner ground, knowing the law must respond to what you persistently plant? The world does not honor this kind of waiting. It glorifies urgency. It rewards the dramatic turnaround, the instant success. But the soul works differently. It is interested in endurance and performance. And endurance requires patience, not just the ability to bear delay, but the ability to stay aligned while you wait. Because every time you choose to remain faithful to your spiritual idea when no proof appears, you are expanding your capacity to receive. You are strengthening the mold. You are shaping your vibration into something that can hold the answer without collapsing under it. And one day, almost without warning, the first sprout appears. A shift in tone, a different response to an old trigger, a small opportunity that leads to something larger. Not because you forced it, but because you stayed faithful to the process. This is the harvest after long patience. It is not showy, it is not always loud, but it is deep. It carries the weight of alignment, the authority of one who has walked through the drought without losing the root. And that authority cannot be faked. It is felt. It gives off something: steadiness, trust, presence. And it becomes a model for others. They may not know your full journey, but they will sense your ground. They will feel the weight of your peace, the calm of your clarity. And they will wonder how you became that way. They will ask what changed. And you will know. The seed never left. You just stayed long enough for it to rise. So if you are waiting now, let it be sacred. You are not stuck. You are not behind. You are ripening. The harvest is real. And it comes to those who remain rooted while they wait. Growth does not stop when the first fruits appear. If anything, that's when the real work begins. The moment something begins to bloom: an insight, a new relationship, a shift in outer circumstance, the temptation to ease off your practice, to stop tending the root, becomes very real. But what begins in spirit must be sustained in spirit, or it withers under the weight of neglect. You have seen this in your own life. A burst of clarity followed by drift. A powerful decision slowly eroded by distraction. The sincere beginning overtaken by the quiet return of the familiar. This is not weakness. It is human. But it is also the place where many lose their way, not because they lacked power, but because they forgot to keep showing up. You must guard the tree. Not with fear, but with devotion. Not as if it's fragile, but as if it matters. Because it does. Every idea you've planted, every practice you've established, every new way of thinking you've chosen to nourish it all depends on your continued attention. Not obsession, not anxiety. Attention. Presence. The mind is not neutral. If left untended, it defaults to the loudest voice. And the world is loud. The notifications, the crises, the endless invitations to comparison and panic, they come daily. And without a clear practice of returning to your inner ground, those voices win. Not because they are more true, but because they are more consistent. Emmet Fox said, "The most important thing in your life is what you are thinking now. Not yesterday's insight, not last week's meditation. Now, this moment. Because this moment is always planting the next one." You cannot live on spiritual leftovers. You need fresh nourishment, daily. This doesn't mean constant effort. It means conscious maintenance. A few minutes of quiet alignment, a pause before reacting, a deliberate return to the ideas you've chosen to grow. The tree doesn't need you to perform. It needs you to remember. And sometimes, remembering is hard. The external world may be rushing forward, demanding that you keep pace. But spiritual life has a different rhythm. It doesn't compete with urgency. It requires stillness. And stillness is a discipline. Guarding the tree means making space, not because your life is already peaceful, but because it needs to be. It means saying no to the conversation that always ends in gossip. It means logging off before your clarity gets buried in opinions. It means not picking at old wounds just because they're familiar, not following every feeling, not chasing every mood. It means loyalty not to your emotions, but to your soul. And yes, there will be days when you forget, when the practice feels dry, when the old patterns knock a little louder. But the tree is still there, the roots still deep. And One active return, one moment of realignment restores the entire field. That's the grace in this work. The law does not hold grudges. It only waits for your attention to come back. So come back. Not out of guilt, but out of knowing. Knowing that your peace is too precious to outsource. Your clarity is too vital to delay. Your spiritual structure is too sacred to leave exposed. This is not about fear of loss. It's about reverence for growth. Because even the healthiest tree can wither if forgotten. Even the deepest truth fades in a distracted mind. Not because it stops being true, but because you stopped being tuned to it. So keep the channel clear. Keep the ground tended. Keep showing up not for perfection, but for presence. This is how you guard the tree. And this is how the tree guards you. The harvest arrives quietly. Not always in the way you imagined. Not in fireworks or fanfare, but in subtler tonasa shift in your inner weather. A sense of ease where struggle used to live. Decisions made without fear. Opportunities appearing without desperation. It doesn't announce itself. It emerges, and when it does, something in you recognizes it. Not as a miracle, but as the natural consequence of faithful cultivation. There is no mystery to the harvest. It reflects what has been consistently held in consciousness. The fruit always matches the seed. If your harvest is peace, it is because you gave peace a home in your thoughts. If it is clarity, it is because you cleared space for truth. If it is connection, it is because you stopped blocking love with old stories. And yet, in this moment of receiving, a new temptation arises, the urge to claim credit, to posture, to make the fruit about yourself. That's the ego's reflex, to turn every good thing into a performance. But real harvest doesn't shout, it nourishes. It doesn't need to be seen. It simply feeds. The tree does not boast. It does not ask to be applauded for bearing fruit. It simply gives. It stands in its fullness and allows others to eat. That is the nature of spiritual harvest, not a personal prize, but a resource. Not an ego achievement, but a quiet overflow. When you reach this place, when your outer life begins to echo your inner work, it can feel surreal. You remember where you started. You remember the doubt, the waiting, the subtle deadness that tried to convince you nothing was working. And now here it is real, solid, alive. But let this moment be grounding, not distracting. Let it bring gratitude, not attachment. Because even the sweetest fruit will rot if hoarded. You are not meant to cling. You are meant to circulate, to share, to allow the results to become nourishment for others, not proof of your worth. Emmet Fox often reminded us that outer success means nothing without spiritual integrity. What good is a fruitful life if it collapses your peace? What use is abundance if it replaces your presence? The harvest is not the end goal, it is the evidence that you've been aligned. It confirms that the law works, and it calls you not to stop but to deepen. This is where the spiritual path separates itself from personal development. The work doesn't end with manifestation. That's where another layer begins. The fruit must now be used wisely. You must ask, how will this harvest serve something beyond me? What will I plant with the energy it has given me? Because every harvest contains seeds, and if you don't plant them, they die in your hands. So celebrate, yes. Rest, yes. But then return to the soil with more humility, more clarity, more reverence. You're not just here to receive, you're here to generate. And that means honoring the cycle. Harvest is not a destination, it's a season, and seasons pass, which is why your root must stay deeper than your results. So, when the fruit fades, as all things eventually do, you are not lost, you are not bitter, you simply continue. That is the secret. The real harvest is not the result. The real harvest is the person you became by staying faithful to the process. And that person is ready for more. There is a stage of growth that goes beyond results, beyond harvest, beyond even your own transformation. It comes quietly, like evening light, no announcement, no trumpet. Just a subtle shift inside, a realization that what you've gained must now be given, that the tree you have become is no longer just a shelter for you, it's a source. a bearer of seeds. And this is the final turn in the spiritual arc. You become the seed for others. Not because you're flawless, not because you've mastered everything, but because something in you has stabilized. The truth has gone from being an idea you reach for to being the ground you stand on. You're no longer obsessed with what life can give you. You begin asking what life can receive through you. This is not sacrifice, it is fulfillment. The seed does not resent its cracking. The tree does not fear its fruit falling. When you've truly grown, you stop clutching at what you've built. You open your hands. You begin to give not as strategy, not as display, but because your roots can't help but feed the ground around you. And here, another dying must take place. The self you worked so hard to protect. The version of you who needed recognition, validation, applause that self no longer fits. It served a purpose. It survived the storm. But now, it's time to let it fall. Not with pain, but with reverence. Something deeper has taken root. And yet, this isn't the heroic ending we've been taught to expect. It feels more like emptiness. Not hollow but open. You walk with the awareness that you will not always see the result of your giving. You speak truth into ears that may not hear it for years. You offer calm into rooms still filled with chaos. You plant in places you may never live to harvest. But you do it anyway. Because by now you know, nothing is ever lost. No act of integrity disappears. No offering of clarity fades into nothing. The law keeps perfect record, even when the world forgets. What you give will echo. Maybe not in ways you can track, but in ways the soul understands. And sometimes someone will come to you not with fanfare, but quietly. They'll say, "Something you said stayed with me," or "That moment changed how I see things." You may not even remember what you said, but the seed remembered. It waited. It grew in silence. And now, it bears fruit in them. This is legacy, not measured in followers or metrics, but in the quiet transmission of truth, in the way your presence made someone else feel less alone, in the courage someone found because you didn't collapse. You don't need to chase this moment. Just be steady, stay aligned, speak what is true when it's called for, step back when it's time, keep planting. Because you are no longer just the tree. You are also the soil, the seed, the sun breaking through someone else's clouds. You are part of a lineage now not of doctrine but of devotion, not of belief but of being. And what you carry will not end with you. It will pass through you. It will rise again in voices you'll never hear, in actions you'll never witness, in lives you'll never meet. That is the final fruit. And it is enough. Let it settle now. There's nothing more to prove, nothing more to chase. The words have been spoken, the seeds have been offered, and the ground of your soul has heard them. You don't need to grasp at meaning or remember every line. What was true has already begun its work. What was real will stay with you. Take a breath, not the kind you force, but the kind that finds you naturally, like an exhale after tension has left. Let the weight you've been carrying fall, just for a moment. The striving, the second-guessing, the silent pressure to become something more. Let it go. Not because you've given up, but because something in you knows the becoming is already happening. If your mind feels quiet now, honor that. If your heart feels tired, respect that too. This journey is not about arriving at some perfect version of yourself. It's about remembering, returning, restoring the connection to what has always been whole within you. You may feel raw. You may feel empty. Good. That's not weakness, it's space. And from space, new life always rises. You don't need to fill the silence. You don't need to rush back to your day. You are allowed to linger here, to let the stillness teach you, to let the unseen take root. No next step is required. No strategy needs forming. Right now, just stay. Stay in the echo of what's been planted. Stay in the atmosphere of alignment. Let the soil do what it does best, nurture, in silence. And when you're ready, move forward gently. Speak slowly. Walk softly. You've just touched something eternal. Let it walk with you now.